Thank you, thank you. Tough act to follow, Greg. Great session, and so much positivity and so much kind of potential excitement around what AI can do for us. And so I feel like I'm going to be the boring one that just tells you, yeah, but have you thought about the risks? Have you thought about the concerns? It's not all as bright and shiny as you've been told. So I want to share a bit of that with you. Look, I'm coming at you from a point of view of being for the last 3 months, in charge of our national agenda on AI, which has been a jarring move from being in the tech industry and Microsoft to kind of looking after our national interests. But it's a truly humbling experience to be in this role. And fundamentally, it does mean we need to think much more, or I need to spend much more time thinking not about the power of the technology, but about the impact of that technology on the lives of ordinary Australians and everybody who may be touched by this. And I often find myself in rooms like this, and it's easy to kind of forget that to a degree, we all live in somewhat of a privileged bubble because we are empowered to, asked to, and have the opportunity to use AI in ways that are not frightening and scary to us in our work and daily lives. But that does not represent a good 90% of Australians out there today who AI to them is a fear factor, it's a disruption to their life, and it generally represents an unknown future to them, and that is a lot of what we need to think about. So with that, let me start by giving you a sense of where I think we're at on this journey to balancing risk and innovation. So I don't know about any of you. I'm old enough to remember that show, which is ironically about 20 odd years old now. But when I hear that sound, it does two things to me. There's a visceral reaction to me. Like I hear that noise and I'm like just a little bit excited because something cool is going to happen for the next 45 minutes. Some mystery is going to be unraveled. Some known that I had is going to be completely shot apart. And I'm going to be looking at a whole new world of, oh my God, what just happened? And at the same time, the sound is meant to make you feel just a little bit scared. Like a little bit apprehensive, like, oh, this doesn't feel safe, this feels unsure, I'm not really confident about what's going to happen next, and that is exactly where we are right now. We are lost. We are lost between the balance, if you've watched the show, the man in white, the man in black, the good, the bad, the smoke monster, the people, all of that. It's a wonderful show, you've got to watch it. But that's where we're at. We're really in this point of, like, we just don't know what to do to go forward. And as Greg so eloquently illustrated, even if we thought we had it all set out today, tomorrow, I'm sorry, you don't, because it's all about to change, and it's happening at such a pace that the idea of balancing good regulation, good rules, good risk-based governance on a system that today does one thing and tomorrow does something completely different is practically impossible. So it's a really hard place to be, but we have to start somewhere. And so let's start with the idea of thinking about, well, why is AI so different? And I get asked this question a lot. In fact, we had this conversation just before we stepped onto stage. But why is AI so different? Because we have been challenged in the digitization of our work and our lives so many times over the past 30 years, 40 years or so. And all of these things, if you kind of stop and think for a moment about when we introduced PCs, when we brought about mobile phones, when we sort of had the internet, in theory, all of these things should have had the same degree of disruption. I mean, there were massive changes to the way that we think, the way we work, the way we operate. I remember my mom in the mid-80s, and I was I'd finished school, I was just heading into uni, and computers were just becoming this thing that you might have had at work, and there was this whole, she was a bookkeeper. And her world was essentially, well, why do you want bookkeepers for? We've got computers, we've got Word, Lotus 1, 2, 3, we've got all these tools, your work is done. Of course, that wasn't the case. And we adapted around it, and as I've just seen from you, the legal industry is not being challenged by a knowledge-based system like AI. It's actually adapting to it and making use of it. So we've adapted to all these things. Why are we not adapting to AI? And it's fundamentally about this key piece, which is there is a huge dichotomy, a huge separation between the risk and the reward in an AI system. Because AI systems challenge us to understand what it fundamentally means to be human. To be creative, to do intelligence-based work. They challenge the very basis of what makes us human. And it also forces us not just to think about the short-term gains that we're going to get from this, but the long-term challenges and changes that are going to come about as a result of AI. You know, and it's, you know, Greg, it's fascinating to listen to that kind of evolution. I've heard it many times. You did an excellent job of it. As we move through this sort of capability model of what AI does, you know, as we've gone from sort of interactive chat systems to deep learning to deep reasoning systems to agentic systems. And we talk about this challenge to humanity, and this is fundamentally, this is the human trait that we're all after. If you think about what AGI is really trying to achieve, because AGI is a nonsense phrase that means nothing, nobody can define it, and we've already got there by many definitions, but this is fundamentally what it is. It's prospection. It's what human beings do so uniquely. It's the reason why we are the dominant species on this planet. It's because we can think about an idea, we can formulate the idea in its completeness in our head and attach emotional logic and reasoning to that thought and then proceed forward to achieve it. AI can do most of that to some degree. You know, you talk about, when Greg talked about agentic systems, they're very good at breaking a problem apart and figuring out the pieces of the puzzle and then re-putting it back together. But what the agent system is not really yet doing, memory constraints, context window constraints, and other technology constraints, is then looking at the whole picture and going, like, how does it look as a total end result? Does it really meet where we first started from? It sorts it out along the way, but it doesn't have that big picture. We as human beings can do that. And then what we can also do, and where models today lack, and you know, Greg mentioned hallucinations, models today are built on a neural network type of model. So this concept that, you know, like a brain, it can sort of think of an idea, test it, evaluate it, and then push it forward to the next phase of the network to kind of work on that concept, which is really good with dealing with huge amounts of abstract data, but it's terrible at logic. And so it falls apart when you then have to go, yeah, that's a wonderful idea you've really understood the problem, but you know, elephants aren't actually made of glass, so you can't get to where you think you want to get to, because it has no logic constraints. So if we then think about the idea of combining neural networks, brain-like activity, and symbolic networks, the idea of applying a logic structure to that, in a concept where we can look at the big picture and apply all of that, and then the last piece is the emotion. The fact that human beings, we can look at all of that and go, yeah, nah, I don't really want to do that. That doesn't feel right to me. It doesn't pass the pub test. That piece will forever be challenging for AI, but much of the work is trying to figure out how we build that in there. Neural networks and symbolic AI are simple, largely done. It's the combination of them. So we really are genuinely on a path to create something that is quite challenging to not just the way we use tools and technology to think about problems, but to us as a species on this planet. And I don't want to over-egg that, but that's really what's happening here, is we're questioning ourselves on what are we building here. So taking that and then looking at it from the lens of me being in a government role, by the way, that time started really short on my time. I'm never going to get within that time window. From a government role, why has it been so hard for us to do this, to build this regulation, to build this construct, to put in place a set of rules that you all can go, got it, right, we know what we can do, let's move forward? Because I hear this, I said it when I was at Microsoft, and now I hear it a lot on this side of the fence. It is so hard to do this because we're not just doing this in a vacuum of, well, what's good for us, and what rules do we want to follow, and you know, what law should we have? It's like this game of 4D chess. We have to figure out, well, what does it mean to our trade relationships? What does it mean to jobs and skills and working? Today is a very important day. If you didn't know it, the Productivity Commission released their first report, or one of the reports, on AI, and made some significant recommendations that will go into the Treasurer's Roundtable that will sort of determine a lot of these rules. We have to think about the South Pacific and the unspoken but obviously understood geopolitical tensions that are surfacing around the world. The US Act, or sort of the US re-emergence of their executive order, was framed winning the AI race. There's a race on. We're trying to win, and winners means there's a loser, or implied losing in that process. So we've got to get this right. There's standards. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's at play. It's really hard to figure out where to start this journey. And that is why it has taken so long to figure this out, because rushing into it, you get an EU AI Act, and not rushing into it, you find yourself where we are, but there's a happy space somewhere in the middle that we need to work towards. And this is the problem today, in my mind, this is certainly my view, not necessarily the government's view, is there are lots of good people in the world today yelling in their corners about the social harms and the social risks of AI. It will rip apart society. It will undermine underprivileged communities and other people. There's no governance, and no one's looking at the risk. We're just running at this thing and hoping that it'll sort itself out. You know, you hear the phrase, let it rip and see what happens kind of mentality around AI. There's a genuine risk to jobs and employment, and it will change jobs. No question about it. It will change jobs, it will change tasks, as has every other technology evolution we've gone through over the last period of time. And there's technology at stake here, there's progress at stake, there's science, there's research at stake. And all four of these people are yelling at each other in a room. It's like a kids at a school dance. They're all yelling at each other, but there's no common ground. None of them is going to walk over to the other one and say, I'm sorry, could we meet and have a chat about what you think? Because nobody cares. They're only interested in their own agenda. And the fact is they're all right. None of them are wrong, but we have to find a cohesive point. We have to accept that there will be some social changes and there will be some job changes, but it will lead to better outcomes. It will lead to more opportunities. We have to figure that balance out. That is the difficulty of the balance of innovation and risk here. It's not about which technology should we use, which product's best, which company should we go, or which country we think about. It's how do we get the balance right so that everybody gets a chance at the opportunity that's in front of us. How do we find a common ground and a shared acceptability of risk in this kind of model? So I've kind of looked at it from three approaches. We were talking before, and before we got into this, and kind of the topic here is how do we balance the risk? The answer is I haven't got a clue. I have no idea. And anyone who tells you they do is lying to you or has something to sell to you. We don't know. There are things that we can do. We're trying to learn this journey through, but it's mostly soft skills. This isn't like, well, you know, if we fix the models to do X, then everything will be fine. It's not going to be solved through technology approach. But I want to share with you what I think are three things that we can do to kind of redress this rebalancing of the narrative. Because I think fundamentally, to me, that is the problem here, is that we are all talking about the risk, we're all talking about the concern, nobody's talking about the opportunity. Or not enough people are talking about the opportunity. You, however, spoke most about the opportunity, which was wonderful to see. I loved it. Okay, so where do we start? We need to tell better stories. And what I mean here by this slide is, in rebalancing the narrative, we need to think about how noise cancelling works. Actually, last time I did this, I used the concept of white noise, because white noise is a noise that actually balances out all other noise. But then when I realized I was telling people that I'm just going to make a lot of white noise, and that seemed like a bad way to frame it. So think of me as a really expensive pair of awesome noise-canceling headphones. But this is the point. We have so much noise out there that will tell you that where the risks of AI are, either the risk of you doing it or the risk of you not doing it. There's no middle ground there. It's either do it or you're gone, or don't do it, or do it and you're going to cause harm. We need to have something that balances out that story. So where is a story that says, yeah, when you do it, there is risks, but there's an apportioned amount of risk that you need to think about, but the outcome, the reward is X. The reward is Y. If you invest the time in building governance, if you invest the time in learning and figuring out how to use AI, balance out that negativity, then we can create a space for this. And that's a job for me in the National AI Centre, is to create that national tone of who in Australia is actually doing good things. Part of the reason I'm here today is because LexisNexis are doing good things with it, and we want to tell more stories like this. There's an interesting academic study. If you're a nerd like Greg and I are, then you would have spent enough time looking at Star Trek and other things like that. There's a genuine academic study that is evaluating the question about whether or not the reason we have intelligent smart devices, iPads, computers that we can talk to, is because they were in Star Trek, and we essentially looked at that and said, let's build that, or simply coincidence. Now, I don't know the answer to it, but the fact of the matter is, Star Trek told a story of the future through the lens of what's opportunity, what positivity could look like, what it might be to be an engaged, welcoming, sort of technologically superior species that didn't kind of do that to the detriment of all others. Now, at the same time, within 10 or 15 years, tell me, I can think of one story that tells the story of AI in a positive lens, and that's by Centennial Man. There's probably others, but that's the one that always springs to mind, and I don't even like the movie, it's not that good, but we tell ourselves stories about AI in a way that leads us to believe that the AI we're going to build is going to have a negative connotation. I challenge any of you to think about an AI in the context of movies, or sort of general social media context, without thinking about it from a negative point of view. So the stories we tell ourselves matter. Now, whether or not you take this piece on board, but generally speaking, we need to tell more stories like this. Now, this is just one I've pulled from the 30 or 40 we have in a directory of stories in the National AI Center. But, sort of, it's not even rocket science half the time. The stories are simple. The Back on Track Foundation, helping children going through cancer treatment to figure out a way to kind of maintain their learning, because it's very disruptive to learning for children in that scenario. So using AI tools to kind of build customized learning programs for them and figure out where they're at on their journey and the time they have. It's not complicated. It's not it's not flying cars and the Jetsons, but it is a very material way in which AI actually brings benefit to society. It's a benefit to all of us in society because everybody knows somebody that is dealing with that kind of situation. So we need to tell better stories. We also need to think about that other human problem we have, which is the prospection, the fact that we are very good at emotionally thinking about a situation and then building an emotional future on it and going, oh, I don't want any part of that. When you see this picture on the screen, what do you think about? Does it make you want to go for a swim? No. I mean, it single-handedly destroyed the sort of the shark culture for a long time. We just assumed that sharks were dangerous and terrifying. Now, of course, they are dangerous and terrifying animals as long as you're in the water. In the water, they're really not that much of a concern for you, so you don't need to think about it. But we find ourselves, because as humans, we are being fed so much of this negativity that we find ourselves in stasis, indecision, and then we find ourselves in uncertainty, so we start to build a certainty of the future. I've read that AI is pretty dangerous and can cause bias and harm, and now it's smarter than a Harvard professor, and I'm not a Harvard professor, so, not for me. It sounds too dangerous, too scary. The only vision I can see of this is a bad one, where I am going to be, kind of lost in this and can't cope and can't keep. We have to think about a proportionality of risk. And again, I'm telling you, this is stuff you have to do. This is my job. I have to do a better job of publishing and providing content that says, hey, if you're in this industry, if you're in this sector, if you're a small business, this is the risk you need to think about, and it's this big. It's not this big. You don't need to be thinking about, the transparency of your reporting systems and recording your data systems for 50 years stored in a locked vault at the bottom of a volcano underneath a rock with a dog guarding it. That's not what you need to do because you don't run that kind of business. Proportionality of risk will help us move past this uncertainty and allow us to think more about what can I do with AI. And I just love this quote because I think it just encapsulates the reality of what any business does today. So Grace Hopper made this point, a ship in a port is safe, but that's not what ships are built for. What is every small business, large business, medium enterprise, large multinational doing every single day of their existence? They're evaluating risk, making a decision, and moving forward in their business. Now, if you're a small business today and you're trying to evaluate that risk of AI, what's your data points? What's your risk analysis? What's your reward side? You've got no visibility of it. There's nothing for you to balance that discussion on, so you're stuck in a port doing nothing, not growing, not building business, not creating new jobs, not building the economy, getting left behind. And the last point for me, although I do have a plug slide, which I need to get to, is this question of artificial intelligence. And we talk so much about this, hey, you must all go and become artificial intelligence specialists. Go learn prompt engineering. Go be good at AI. What? What are you going to go and learn? I mean, if you go and learn to be good at it, are you going to become PhD scientists, data scientists in engineering and figure out how to write Python script? Although you could do that coding now, you don't need to do it. What you really want is artificial useful intelligence. Artificial intelligence that is useful to you in your context. We need to tell more stories about what AI means for human beings, not for what AI means for systems. We talk so much about the idea that we must build smarter logistics systems. We must build better medical systems. Yes, of course, but who builds those? Who operates them? Who lives within those systems and delivers the outcomes on them? It's human beings, it's us, it's people. So it should be useful in the context of me as a human being and the jobs and the tasks I do, not just a process of skilling up. So for me, the core of this is literacy. This isn't about learning what AI is, it's about learning the boundaries of AI. If you were an engineer or a nerd like me, the first thing you did when you got something like an electrical device is you took it apart to figure out how it worked. Hopefully you put it back together again, but mostly you just took it apart to figure out how it works. That's literacy of the electronics. We need to take AI apart a bit. We need to be not afraid to put something into it, make a mistake, have it cause a harm, because we can do it in a safe environment and learn from that so we can figure out, you know what, I could use this to do that, but I'm probably never going to use it to do that. make it contextual, make it useful, make it yours. So for business leaders, that's about investing in the value of AI, training and knowledge for your staff. But for workers, it's about making sure you can see AI as a tool for you, not just for your business. Because we all want to use AI to get better jobs, bigger jobs, grow the wages, grow the opportunity for us. That grows the economy as large. It's not just about building businesses, it's about building people in this process. Last slide, bit of a plug. You can take a screen of the code to get a copy of many of these reports, but we publish a ton of reports every year on Australia's AI ecosystem, the standard we've written for voluntary AI safety guidelines, and the adoption tracker, which we publish monthly, which gives you a sense of who in Australia is using AI and how are they growing that, where are they using it. Please use all these resources, they're there for you to use. And if you have any feedback about what we're doing, or you want to get in contact with me or the NAIC, because you want to give us some ideas, and we want ideas, my contact details are there, the NAIC's details are there, subscribe to our newsletter. I am way over time and I'm done. Sorry, Jen. But I think you're up next, but I'm not sure if, yes. But thank you for that, and please welcome Jen.